morning, and welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Urbana-Champaign. My name is Reverend Sally Fritchie. My pronouns are she and they, and I am the Associate Minister of this congregation. I'm so glad to be here with you, streaming live from the sanctuary on Green Street this morning. Our congregation's mission is to build community, seek inspiration, promote justice, and find peace. We're a church of many theologies that values deeds before creeds. We're a church that strives to build a beloved community in the here and now. This service is a collaboration with many voices contributing. Some members of our youth group have added their own perspectives, and our REE coordinator, Rose St. Clair, is sharing not only our story for all ages, but also a reflection on their own lived experience as a non-binary person. This morning is a celebration of trans and gender non-conforming identity, and an invitation to be together in the liberating spaces that exist between and beyond more traditional ways of thinking. No matter your experience of gender, we hope you will enter into our time together with love and openness, and come away with a renewed appreciation for all the incredible beauty of our shared world that still holds so much mystery and difference. If you want to follow along with a written order of service, you can find that link just below this video on our website. And if you want to chat with your fellow UUCUC members, you can find the live stream chat box on our YouTube page. Remember that because we are live, there's still time to make your own contributions to our shared joys and sorrows later in the service. To do that, you just email your message to joysandsorrows@uucuc.org. This congregation chooses to begin every Sunday with a formal acknowledgement of the indigenous nations of this land. It's a practice that connects us to the history of this place and to our own responsibilities as stewards and members of a wider community. Wherever you are listening from today, take a moment and bring to mind the indigenous peoples and varied histories of your place. There will be a moment of silence after the acknowledgement, and in that silence, I invite you to consider how specifically you might amplify the voices or contribute to the efforts of Native activists in the coming week. We recognize and acknowledge that we gather today on Indigenous land, taken through deception, coercion, and violence. We acknowledge the continued displacement and oppression of Indigenous communities, and we lift up Native commitments to survival, identity, and the protection of this world. Thank you. And now, if you have a candle or a chalice to light at home, please join us in lighting it now. Lighting this flame when we gather together is an invitation to center ourselves and rest in the warm circle of light it creates. This morning, our chalice will be lit with words written by genderqueer poet Day Heisinger Nixon.
And lo, in every country, I spell myself wrong. Am spelled wrong and am chronically. Can you see me from your front porch? Gardenias sprouting from your pockets.
It Feels Good to Be Yourself, a book about gender identity, written by Teresa Thorne and illustrated by Noah Grigney. This is Ruthie. She's a transgender girl. That means when she was born, everyone thought she was a boy, until she grew a little older, old enough to tell everyone that she's actually a girl. Girl is Ruthie's gender identity. This is Ruthie's brother, Xavier. Xavier is a cisgender boy. That means when Xavier was born, everyone thought he was a boy. And as he grew older, it turned out everyone was right. He is a boy. Boy is Xavier's gender identity. There are so many different ways to be a boy or a girl, too many to fit in a book. But not everyone feels like either a boy or a girl. Non-binary is a helpful word that can describe a kid who doesn't feel exactly like a boy or a girl. This is Ruthie's friend Alex. Alex is both a boy and a girl. When Alex was born, everyone thought Alex was a girl, but Alex is both boy and girl. This is Alex's gender identity. This is Alex's friend JJ. JJ is neither a boy nor a girl. Ever since JJ was very little, they never felt exactly like a boy or a girl. They just felt like themselves. This is JJ's gender identity. Alex and JJ are both non-binary. Just like there are many different ways to be a boy or a girl, there are many different ways to be non-binary. Too many to fit in a book. Some kids feel like girls. Some kids feel like boys. Some kids feel like a little bit of both, part boy, part girl. Some kids don't feel exactly like a boy or a girl. They feel like neither. Some kids feel that their gender identity isn't always the same. It's often changing. And even with all these possible ways to be, some kids don't feel any of the words they know fit them exactly right. There are a never-ending number of ways to be yourself in the world. Whether you feel like a boy, a girl, both, or neither, or if you describe yourself another way, that is your gender identity. Your gender identity might match what people thought when you were born, or it might not. See, when you were born, you couldn't tell people who you were or how you felt. They looked at you and made a guess. Maybe they got it right, maybe they got it wrong. What a baby's body looks like when they're born can be a clue to what the baby's gender will be, but not always. When people guess wrong, it's okay to let them know. Ruthie was 5 when she told her parents, "I know you think I'm a boy, but really I feel like a girl." Oops, Ruthie was a girl all along. They just didn't know it at first. When people guess right, it's also okay to let them know. Xavier was 3.5 when he told his family, "I'm a boy. I like being a boy." You might feel like a boy. You might feel like a girl. You might feel like both boy and girl, or like neither. You might feel like your gender changes from day to day or from year to year. You might feel that none of these words describe you perfectly. You might not be sure yet. Maybe you're still figuring it out. Your feelings about your gender are real. Listen to your heart. No matter what your gender identity is, you are okay exactly the way you are, and you are loved. It feels good to be yourself, doesn't it?
Having a queer sibling has really opened my eyes to some of the injustices of the world. When they first came out, I was confused and didn't know what to think, especially since this was the first time anyone had ever come out to me. But as I watched them change their name and change their pronouns, I noticed they were more comfortable in their own skin. It showed me that they were finally completely happy with who they are. And what's more important than that? LGBTQ plus phobia is scary to me, and I hope my sibling won't ever be in danger just because of who they are. There are things in the world that give me hope, like people introducing themselves with their pronouns, even if they are cisgender and straight. I hope that means the world will accept them fully. It makes me happy knowing my sibling is comfortable with who they are. I am so glad they felt safe enough to come out, but also really proud of the courage it must have taken. Because of all it has taught me, I'm really grateful to have a queer sibling, especially the sibling I have. I love you, Ren.
Each Sunday here at UUCUC, we make space to share the joys and sorrows closest to our hearts. What joys and what sorrows do you carry into our time together today? Let them rise to mind now, and if you wish me to share them aloud, there's still some time to send them in to joysandsorrows@uucuc.org. Together, we're going to hear our blessing song, Long Time Son, and then I will share aloud the joys and sorrows of this community.
May the long time sun shine upon you. All love surround you, and the pure light that's within you guide your way home. May the long time sun shine upon you. All love surround you, and the pure light that's within you guide your way home. May the long time sun shine upon you. All love surround you, and the pure light that's within you guide your way
A Joy from Julie Loud. Joyous congratulations to my daughter, Celia Barbieri, for an outstanding senior year cross-country season. Celia not only made it to state and was awarded her team's most valuable player, but as a result of her academic excellence, she was recognized with 2 statewide Scholar Athlete honors. A Sorrow from Jerry Carden. Sorrow for all the transgender folks who have lost their lives due to violence or suicide in the past year. Thank you, Reverend Sally and Nicole Friedman of Uniting Pride, for a beautiful candlelight vigil last evening on the church lawn. From the Herzogs. We are grateful for this church and our community that has helped our non-binary kiddo find what's true for them and feel loved and supported for who they are. May they and many others continue to find that acceptance and support out in the world. A Joy from Umita. Joy and gratitude for this beautiful service and for this welcoming church that embraces all the ways we are ourselves. A sorrow for the trial in Kenosha. Though we would not rejoice at the idea of anyone going to prison, I cannot help but be deeply troubled by the implications of allowing armed vigilantes to patrol whatever protests they deem dangerous. We are heartbroken to be told by our justice system that protecting inanimate property is a good enough reason to carry weapons of war and use them against each other. A joy and sorrow from Laura Breeze Troyer. Joy for this congregation and other safe places that provide an open and welcoming space for the non-binary in our church and our community. Sorrow that not everywhere is yet a safe space. Prayers from Cameron and Michelle Pitzel. Prayers for our nephew who was quarantined for COVID exposure at daycare. Sorrow from Pat DeWalt. Our beloved dog Annie passed away in our home on Thursday afternoon. She had an enormous personality and a great enthusiasm for life that filled our home for 11 of her 13 years. We will miss her greatly. A joy from Jenny Hunt. Had the opportunity on our trip to visit with 2 cousins on the East Coast that I have not seen in a very long time. Sharing of family stories and catching up on lives. What a tremendous gift. From Joe Omo Osagie. Celebrate the extraordinary life of Janice Mitchell. Janice impacted Champaign and Urbana youth through her work as a community organizer and social worker. She worked tirelessly at Cunningham Children's Home and the Urbana School District, and 11 years ago started the Urbana Neighborhood Connection to provide after-school enrichment activities to young people in the area. Her physical absence will be felt, but her spirit will live on forevermore. Donate to this organization as they will probably struggle as their founding light has been dimmed. Strength for Beth Simpson from Paul Kaiser. Please send strength to Beth Simpson, who suffered a stroke sometime Saturday and is now in Carl ICU. She will need to do a lot of work to regain use of her right side and speech. A joy from Wendy Graves. Joy for our grandson Axel's 5th birthday today and the wonderful job his parents are doing co-parenting. Thank you all for sharing. Know that if your sorrow was too painful to speak today, or if your joy was still too private, it's still held by this community. I invite you to take a breath, rest your eyes if you can, drop your shoulders, and let us hold all of these tender joys and sorrows in gratitude and in hope. And let us add one more prayer in joy and in sorrow to honor, as mentioned, yesterday's vigil for Transgender Day of Remembrance. A vibrant and loving community gathered together on our lawn last night to honor and mourn all the lives lost to anti-trans violence in the past year. Trans experience is so much more than death and hardship, and we pray that our siblings and neighbors will one day know a life free from that fear. When we remember those we have lost, we reaffirm that the heartbeat of the trans and gender non-conforming community cannot be silenced. Trans life, trans joy is a miracle. And that persistent beat continues on in the face of every oppression. May we continue to fight for the dignity and safety of every person, and may every person of every gender be supported in realizing their own worth. May we all find the families and communities that will love and affirm each of us for who we are. No matter the joys or sorrows you carry in your heart today, spoken or unspoken, I pray that you feel the love of this community stretching between us in this moment and beyond us. And I pray that you always find in it whatever it is you need most. Amen. Please take these next moments to find your own prayer, your own words, asking for what you need, or simply breathing and resting in this moment for meditation.
This is an excerpt from a 2016 New York Times op-ed by Rabbi Mark Samuth titled, "Is God Transgender?" I'm a rabbi, so I'm particularly saddened whenever religious arguments are brought in to defend social prejudices, as they often are in the discussion about transgender rights. In fact, the Hebrew Bible, when read in its original language, offers a highly elastic view of gender. And I do mean highly elastic. In Genesis 3:12, Eve is referred to as he. In Genesis 9:21, after the flood, Noah repairs to her tent. Genesis 24:16 refers to Rebekah as a young man, and Genesis 1:27 refers to Adam as them. Surprising? I know. Why would the Bible do this? These aren't typos. In the ancient world, well-expressed gender fluidity was the mark of a civilized person. Such a person was considered more godlike. In ancient Mesopotamia and Egypt, the gods were thought of as gender fluid, and human beings were considered reflections of the gods. The 4 Hebrew letter name of God, which scholars refer to as the Tetragrammaton YHWH, was probably not pronounced Jehovah or Yahweh, as some have guessed. The Israelite priests would have read the letters in reverse as who, he. In other words, the hidden name of God was Hebrew for he, she. Scientists now tell us that gender identity, like sexual orientation, exists on a spectrum. Some of us are in greater or lesser alignment with the gender assigned to us at birth. Some of us are in alignment with both, or with neither. For others of us, alignment requires more of a process. Gender is a bit like music. Each of us has a key and a range with which we are most comfortable. Attuned to ourselves and to one another, we can find happiness and harmony. It may come as a surprise that scientists view gender as anything other than a simple binary. But even thousands of years ago, as a review of ancient literature makes clear, that truth was known. In court challenges, administrative directives, and popular culture, the issue playing out now, in real life, before our eyes. But behind the unfolding legal drama lies the reality of human nature. The fact that gender is not, nor has it ever been, a matter of either or.
Bring many names, beautiful
Good morning, everyone. My name is Rose St. Clair, and I'm the coordinator for religious exploration and engagement here at UUCUC. This morning, I wanted to share with you some reflections on being a non-binary individual. I want to preface what I share with an acknowledgement that I am just one person with a singular experience, and that what is true for me is just that, true for me. I've often faced pressure from others who want to learn more about the non-binary experience, which is as varied and complex as any experience is. But I'm thankful for this space to reflect on my non-binary experience and to share with you all today. I know that without learning more about the experiences of non-binary individuals throughout my own journey, I would have continued to struggle silently in my own doubt and confusion. So to start, I identify as non-binary, transgender, and gender fluid. In one way or another, I have always known this about myself. As a scared child, navigating the expectations of gender performance, as a confused teenager, navigating my growing body and my sexuality, and as a stumbling adult, navigating my own narrative in work and relationships. However, it wasn't until a few years ago that I was gifted the language to share my true gender identity with the world around me. I started slow, with family and friends, receiving love and support, feeling excitement when hearing my pronouns, my title, knowing that others saw me and thought, that's Mick St. Clair, and they are non-binary. At the same time, I was continuing to live in a society that forced me to live in constant discomfort that has at times taken the form of hiding myself away, whether it was to avoid making decisions in a binary-laden world or to protect myself. See, being open about being non-binary has brought with it some of the most difficult experiences that I have ever faced, but also some of the most rewarding and magical experiences I can imagine. To be able to have others see me fully, to think about my future and the life that I can create, and to inspire and empower others. Those have been some of the greatest joys of my life. I can only imagine the joy of life ahead for all as we continue to pull away from unnecessary binaries, as we challenge our own stereotypes and biases, and we continue to embrace the full spectrum of individuals so that no one has to feel the pain of hiding themselves away.
We, as Unitarian Universalists, acknowledge that our circle of care does not stop at our church doors. We are deeply connected to the community we find ourselves in and to the wider world. Please continue to keep an eye on your e-news weekly newsletter for opportunities to show up, find support, get involved, and be part of this community. It is with great joy in my heart that I can say last night a years-long effort by the Immigration Justice Task Force came to fruition when we were able to welcome a family of 7 Afghan refugees into our church, where they will stay until our local refugee center secures more permanent housing. The entirely volunteer-led effort to equip our church basement with sleeping cots, linens, and supplies for hosting immigrant and refugee families is an example of the absolute best of Unitarian Universalism. And I hope that everyone who has been involved in welcoming this family feels proud of what you have accomplished. If you want to get on board and help the Immigration Justice Task Force with their ongoing work, please reach out to ijtf@uucuc.org. That's IJTF as in Immigration Justice Task Force. I will also say that your COVID advisory group has been hard at work, incorporating everything they heard at the congregational conversations held earlier this month. And we are officially making the switch from COVID Act Now metrics to the more relaxed local CU Public Health District guidelines, which means that REE, the choir, committees, and other small groups can start reserving space for in-person gatherings at church starting after December 5th, a date that we set partly to give our refugee family the time and space that they need. And watch your e-news for more updates on how Sunday service options will be changing in the coming weeks. If you have big feelings about COVID and about how life has changed these past 2 years, I encourage you to show up for our Life During COVID talk sessions with the UU Companion Ministry, which are at 10:30 a.m. every first and third Saturday. These gatherings started as a grief and loss group before expanding to include all the emotions we need to process about our pandemic world. This space is here for you, and it makes a big difference to commiserate and support each other. Each Sunday, in recognition of our very real interdependence and reliance on one another, we pass the plate and share our offering with an organization doing the work of justice in the world. The decision about which organizations will be recipients of our shared offering is made by you, the congregation, on a yearly basis. And if you have some ideas of justice efforts or nonprofits that could use our support in the next year, find the nomination form in your e-news and make your suggestion before Monday, November 29th. This is your chance to have a huge impact for a cause or organization that you care about. During the month of November, half of our collection goes to the Maya Impact School, a Guatemalan nonprofit focused on nourishing the potential of Indigenous women and girls, which helps address the root causes of mass emigration and equips Guatemalan communities with the knowledge and resources they need to make real change. You can give by text or through the online portal on our website. Half of your donation will go toward the work of this church, half will go to the Maya Impact School. We invite you to give whatever is generous for you, and know that anything you give will be gratefully received and put to work making a real impact in the world. The offering will now be taken. In bringing up the topic of trans and gender nonconforming identity, I find myself pulled in so many different directions. I'm torn between giving a biology 101 lesson on hormones and the intersex spectrum, a grammar lesson on pronouns, or a world religions lesson on the history of sacred third genders. But even all those options still get it wrong. I'm not here to give a lesson. I'm not your guest lecturer. I'm your minister. Embracing the spectrum of gender identities beyond traditional male and female binary is most often treated as a matter of politics, or sometimes a matter of science, medicine, or for the justice-minded, a matter of equality and human rights. And these are all legitimate approaches to this conversation. But today, let me remind you that gender is also a spiritual matter. And recognizing the true diversity of our fellow humans is part of the journey toward wholeness and holiness for all of us. There are Gender Identity 101 lessons elsewhere, but this is a church service. Transgender, after all, shares a prefix with transcendent and transformational, that which moves across boundaries and leaves us changed. And what is good religion if not that? The transcendent, the transformational. Our reading from Rabbi Sameth said, gender is like music, each of us playing in a range and key that suits us and finding harmony together. I like that. But for a more visual thinker, you might say gender is like a color field with all kinds of gradients, light and dark, saturated and pastel, lots of difference and distinction, but blurred and blended together without clear borders. And where your identity lands on this gradient has to do with your body parts, your hormones, your internal feelings, your brain chemistry, and other individual traits. And then we, as a society, draw these circles around certain ways of being, certain bodies, clothing, and behaviors, and say, these are the two options, girl and boy. And that leaves all these people, all these other ways of being out. If your body, your behavior, your aesthetic, your voice, your preferences don't fit within one of these either-or categories, you might be punished for it by bullying or rejection, or in the most extreme cases, by the denial of your humanity and your human rights. If you were a little boy who loved wearing dresses, you might have been told that made you less of a man, and you were pushed out of that blue circle. Maybe that made you stop wearing dresses because you wanted to be let back in. But then if you later grew up and said, actually, that's right, I am a girl, those same social norms will try and say that you don't belong in the pink circle either. So when we first learn about trans identities, it can be easy to think that that means, oh, people should be allowed to move from one circle to the other. And yes, we should be allowed to move from one gender identity to a different gender identity. Some trans women are very much about fitting into the girly category in every way. And some trans men are very invested in being as manly as possible. But do you see how that would still leave all these other people out? Not everyone wants to fit inside the binary of boy or girl. And not everyone can fit in one of those two circles. So, hey, an easy solution, make a third option. Call it non-binary. Add another circle that is a perfectly blended balance of the other two. Problem solved. That way, anyone who falls exactly between masculine and feminine, or who looks androgynously agender, has a circle of their own to fit into. But no, of course, that's not it either, because look at all the field of color that is still left unrecognized, unseen, unnamed. Non-binary isn't just a third gender, a third circle to sort people into. Non-binary means simply not of the binary. It means recognizing and embracing the whole field, and allowing those hard dividing lines around our gender binary to soften into something a little closer to the complex reality of the human experience. That's what I mean when I titled this service, God is non-binary. I mean, God is that which is not binary. The divine is everything that is not either or, not neatly compartmentalized or limited to two options. Now, you all may know that I'm an atheist, so you should know I'm not talking about an entity named God, a supernatural person who has a gender and whose gender identity is non-binary. That would be valid, and plenty of faiths do worship non-binary or gender fluid or genderless gods. No, what I mean when I say God is non-binary is that which is divine, holy, sacred, is that which is beyond binaries, beyond limiting categories. That which is sacred is that which transcends, transforms, breaks through our limited either-or thinking. There is holiness in the color field itself, not in the arbitrary labels and circles we draw over it. When Rabbi Mark Samuth says God is transgender, he points to Scripture, which is holy to him. When I say God is non-binary, I point to the universe, where everything is permeable, everything exists as a gradient, a spectrum, a curve with long tails on either end, an infinite and expanding field of possibility. We do our best to categorize, to label, and we do a pretty good job of it. But reality ultimately does not conform to our categorizations. It's the other way around. And that's what I love. Reality is holy. And it is most holy when it defies all our attempts to pin it down and contain it. When reality bursts open our binary thinking, that is a religious experience to me. I'm a Unitarian Universalist, which means I'm a spiritual descendant of the Transcendentalists, Emerson and Whitman and Fuller. And this is the God that they worshipped. Trans is a prefix meaning to cross over or pass through, and it means the same thing in transcendentalism as it does in transgender. There are truths that cannot be bound by institutions, by language, or by social norms. And these truths, this divinity, crosses every fence we put up, passes through every limiting boundary we use to try to better understand it. It refuses to be placed in a binary of holy versus worldly, or heaven versus earth, but instead infuses all of our earthly existence with sacred importance. Walt Whitman, transcendentalist poet, wrote when trying to capture the ineffable grandeur of his world and self and God, wrote, "They are but parts. Anything is but a part. See ever so far, yet there's limitless space outside of that. Count ever so much, and there's limitless time around that. I know I have the best of time and space, and was never measured, and never will be measured." Accepting and embracing non-binary identities is a good in and of itself. It will protect and honor our fellow human beings, which is always the right thing to do. Getting used to they, them pronouns is a good start and a worthy goal. But if we can truly understand what it is to let go of our tight grasp on the gender binary and look beyond it, we will also be gifted with a kind of spiritual signpost pointing us toward a powerful truth about other binaries we find ourselves taking for granted. Think again of our color map, with its binary of two socially acceptable circles to choose from. What other concepts might we map in that way? What do we talk about as if they are opposites, as if they are mutually exclusive and clearly divided, when in reality they exist in a blurred and many-colored field? How about good and evil? What is missed when we try to sort people neatly into those circles? Who and what exists in that wide, blurred together field outside that binary? If we could learn to see the world without this binary, would violence appeal to us less? Would our judgments be more just, our actions more liberatory? Or what about the binary of the natural world versus the human-made world? What does a non-binary worldview look like when applied there? The binary of atheist and religious, even the binary of life and death, need not be as opposite and opposed as we sometimes convince ourselves that they are. And I say again that God, that is profundity, meaning, holiness, the divine spark, exists most powerfully when we recognize the falseness of all those either-ors and learn to live in the not binary space between and beyond. Gender, like most things, it turns out, is not and never has been a matter of either or. And when we embrace and celebrate that fact, we are moving closer to the beautiful, transcendent, non-binary truth that we are all lucky enough to be a part of. Amen.
not in me, I do not know what it is, but I know it is in me. I do not know it, it is without name, it is a word unsaid. It is not in any dictionary, utterance, symbol. I too am not a bit tamed. I too am untranslatable.
We extinguish these flames, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.